Een diplomatieke rel tussen het Verenigd Koninkrijk en Rusland. Zondag is een Russische ex-spion mogelijk vergiftigd.
Britain is captivated by poison. Last March, a former Russian double agent and his daughter fell victim to a nerve gas attack.
It is now clear that Mr. Skripal and his daughter were poisoned with a military-grade nerve agent of a type developed by Russia.
British intelligence services hold Moscow responsible for the assault.
The poisoning of Sergei and Yulia Skripal is the latest in a long line of suspected assassination attempts in Britain.
We are afraid, and this is a real danger, and we take it very seriously.
I've been threatened with death by the Russians. I've been threatened with kidnapping by the Russians.
Once, Bill Browder was Russia's largest foreign investor, but today, he is considered an enemy of the Kremlin.
I've made serious adjustments over the last 8 years to protect myself. I live a life which is completely different than the life of a normal person who's not being targeted by Vladimir Putin.
Browder's story seems to be coming straight from an espionage thriller. Several major players in that story are said to have been murdered over the past few years.
All you have to do is follow the money and see where it goes. That's the only story that matters.
$230 million have vanished from the Russian treasury, often to shady tax havens. Some of the money is said to have been laundered through the Netherlands. A reason for Zembla to look into the greatest tax fraud in Russian history.
Should Holland allow Russian torturers and murderers to come to the country and use the banking system or not?
Sergei was a very soft-spoken genius. He was kind of like the rock which we built our company on.
Sergei was one of the person that you could fully rely on.
Sergei Magnitsky refused to sacrifice his integrity. He refused to perjure himself. He refused to bear false witness.
Just never in a million years could I ever conceive of the fact that he was going to die in prison.
On November 16, 2009, Sergei Magnitsky died in a Russian prison cell after a year of suffering abuse and neglect. His death aroused a storm of indignation all over the world. Magnitsky became the symbol of Russian human rights violations.
Sergei Magnitsky was an ordinary man, but he became an extraordinary champion of justice, fairness, and the rule of law in Russia, where those principles have lost nearly all meaning.
Why was Magnitsky in prison? And who are the people responsible for his death? To understand that, we have to go back in time nearly 20 years.
Я ухожу.
When Boris Yeltsin retired as president, he left behind a country where corruption and crime were the order of the day. At that time, this man was well on his way to becoming the largest foreign investor in Russia, Bill Browder. He owned a billion-dollar company in Moscow, Hermitage Capital.
How was it possible for you to earn a lot of money without getting dirty?
We bought shares of Russian companies, and most of the time, almost all the time, these companies were highly corrupt. And then we would try to make money by studying how the corruption took place and then exposing the corruption through the international and domestic media as a way of naming and then shaming them into not being corrupt.
Browder made a lot of enemies along the way. Enemies in the highest of places. He was deported from Russia, and the police began investigating his companies.
On June 4th, 2007, I got a call from my secretary saying that there's 25 police officers raiding in my office. I then got a call from my lawyer, an American lawyer, saying there's 25 more officers raiding the office here in Moscow.
And they corralled me and everybody in the office into our conference room while they proceeded to tear my office apart, looking for very particular types of information.
What kind of information were they looking for?
Well, that was what was so interesting. You'd get a guy like police officer carrying a folder on the phone. We found this folder for a company that paid a lot of taxes. Should we take it? We're taking it.
The police officers seized all of our stamps, seals, and certificates for our investment holding companies.
Why is that important?
These are effectively like the keys to the car if you say your car is a company. So these are the documents you need to run a Russian company, to register transactions, to give powers of attorney, to basically operate an investment holding company.
Soon, it became clear that something was very wrong with Browder's companies.
The next thing we knew, we no longer owned our investment holding companies. Those documents had been used to fraudulently re-register our companies out of our name into the name of a man who had been convicted of murder and let out of jail early by the police, effectively to put his name on these documents.
The police officers who had taken the documents turned out to be collaborating with a group of criminals. On paper, that gang now owns Browder's companies. But what was behind that?
That was very strange, and we called Sergei and asked him to investigate this matter. And Sergei was our, actually, eyes, hands, legs, feet, a man on the ground in Russia.
Sergei Magnitsky was a tax specialist, working in the law firm with which Browder did business.
Sergei worked for me, and he had worked for Hermitage for years. But once he found out that these companies had been re-registered, what he ended up doing for Hermitage was quite different. It became almost an investigator.
Magnitsky found out that the police and the criminals had set up an ingenious fraud scheme.
What these criminals and government officials did was they went to the tax authorities in Moscow with our stolen companies and said there was a mistake made in the previous year's tax filing. They applied for a $230 million tax refund. They applied for it on the 23rd of December, 2 days before Christmas, and it was approved and paid out the next day, Christmas Eve, no questions asked, the largest tax refund in the history of Russia.
In short, Magnitsky discovered a conspiracy involving criminals, police officers, and employees of the tax authority who used Browder's companies for a huge tax fraud scheme.
Sergei went to the police to testify about this.
He did. He went to the police in Moscow to try and get them to investigate.
But then, a dramatic plot twist.
5 weeks after Sergei gave testimony, some of the same police officers who he testified against came to his home at 8 in the morning.
So his kids, his kids went to school. He said goodbye to them. And then they spent all day searching. And at the end of the search, they said, we got more questions for you. Would you come down to the station? And then as soon as he got to the station, they said, you're under arrest.
It would be the last time Sergei Magnitsky saw his children.
He was then put in pretrial detention. And in pretrial detention, he was then tortured to get him to withdraw his testimony against the police officers. And they wanted him to sign a false confession to say that he stole the $230 million, and he did so on my instruction.
And pressure is achieved by, you know what we want you to say. Very sorry that it's -10 in your cell and you don't have a window. Very sorry that you want medicine and medical care, but you know what we want you to say.
But you should know that Sergei was a person that will never cross the line of honesty.
The pressure kept on increasing and increasing. And after about 6 months in prison, he developed a very serious medical condition. He ended up losing 20 kilos. He developed terrible pains in his stomach, and he was diagnosed as having pancreatitis and gallstones.
As Magnitsky has given an accurate description of his situation, we can reconstruct his time in prison exactly. He begged for medical care, but it was denied to him repeatedly. In November 2009, Magnitsky is placed in isolation.
The Russians are good about documenting everything. So we have the signed order from the police officer authorizing officers to beat the prisoner with truncheons.
They chained him to a bed, and 8 riot guards with rubber batons beat Sergei Magnitsky to death.
You look at the pictures of Sergei after his death, and you can see where the handcuffs cut through his skin as he was trying to, hide from the people who were beating him.
It's still hard for you.
Yes, it's terrible.
Do you sometimes feel, responsible for what happened to him?
Yes, I was responsible. He worked for me, and he got killed for doing what he did for my company and for Bill, and we were unable to save him. All of us wish this went differently.
Photographs of Magnitsky's hands and legs show wounds. According to the death certificate, he died of acute heart failure. But the document also mentions serious brain damage and pancreatic necrosis.
I received the news of Sergei Magnitsky's murder, and it was the most heartbreaking, horrific, life-changing news I could have ever gotten. It was like a knife going right into my heart. And when I finally was able to calm down and think clearly, after a few hours, it was obvious to me that I had no choice but to put aside everything else I was doing in my life and devote all of my time, all of my resources, and all of my energies to going after the people who killed Sergei Magnitsky, make sure they face justice.
Magnitsky's death had a drastic impact on Browder's life. Once a capitalist at heart, he became a human rights activist, a campaign leader.
I first went to Washington, and I said, can we freeze the assets and ban the visas of the people who killed Sergei Magnitsky? And they said yes.
I think we are sending a signal to Vladimir Putin and to the Russian kleptocracy that these kinds of abuses of human rights will not be tolerated without us responding in some appropriate fashion.
In 2012, President Obama signed the American Magnitsky Act,
which publicly names the names, freezes the assets, and bans the visas of people who killed Sergei and people who do similar terrible atrocities in Russia.
The U.S. government published a list of names of Russians involved in the fraud and in Magnitsky's death. They were no longer allowed to enter the United States, and their assets were frozen. The Kremlin was furious and retaliated with their own law.
The Russian President Vladimir Putin has ratified a new law banning Americans from adopting Russian children. The adoption law has brought protests inside Russia. There are fears that the legislation will penalize children.
After the first success in Washington, Browder's campaign really gained momentum. The American Magnitsky Act, which first focused only on Russia, was expanded. The act now covers corruption and human rights violations all over the world. And it doesn't stop at an American act.
There's now a Canadian Magnitsky Act. There's now a UK Magnitsky Act. There's a Lithuanian, a Latvian, an Estonian Magnitsky Act. The little island of Gibraltar off the coast of Spain has a Magnitsky Act. And I'm now traveling across Europe. I believe that there should be a Magnitsky Act in the Netherlands.
As early as 2011, Browder visited The Hague on the invitation of members of parliament.
Hi. Hi. We spoke on the phone. Bill Browder. Very nice to meet you. Excellent. When I went to the Dutch parliament, I told the story of Sergei Magnitsky, and I asked the members of the Foreign Affairs Committee from all the different political groups whether they would support calling on the government for a Magnitsky Act. And I got unanimous support in the Foreign Affairs Committee.
I gladly support a motion that would ask for this, but I can't guarantee that this will actually lead to success.
All I ask is that you table motion.
Browder mainly remembered the contribution by Frans Timmermans, at the time still a member of parliament for the Dutch Labour Party.
My impression was that he was my staunch ally, that he was a man of principle and a man of morality. I think he was one of the key people who made this whole thing happen.
Parliament was convinced. A motion calling on the government to support Magnitsky sanctions was adopted unanimously.
I was very encouraged. I thought with the unanimous support of the Dutch Parliament, how could the government not act on that recommendation?
But Browder got ahead of himself. Uri Rosenthal, Minister of Foreign Affairs, was not in favor of Dutch sanctions at all.
Ik vond dat dit in Europees verband moest worden aangepakt. Dat was altijd zo bij zaken die met mensenrechten van doen hadden. Als je dan een sanctie uitvaardigt, heeft het weinig zin om dat alleen voor Nederland te doen. Dan moet je dat Europees doen, dan komt het nog een beetje door.
Moreover, Rosenthal first wanted to await the outcome of an investigation by Russia itself into Magnitsky's death.
We zaten in andere tijden toen, in 2011.
Dacht u toen, Rusland gaat deze zaak tot op de bodem uitzoeken en de schuldigen straffen?
Ik had in elk geval geen reden om Rusland te bejegenen zoals je dat zou doen wanneer er een rechtsgang zou zijn in een wreed onderdrukkingsregime.
It's sort of an absurdity if we're saying that there's no possibility of justice in Russia because the judges are corrupt and they participated in a crime and a murder to then rely on them to come up with a verdict. That's the whole point of the Magnitsky Act, is because the justice system is completely failed in Russia.
Browder's office in an expensive London neighborhood houses the headquarters of an international investigative operation that has been going on for 8 years.
That's how the investigation started from the beginning, if we go back in time.
One day, in the summer of 2010, we got a strange email saying that I've got information on the tax officer involved in this terrible scheme. Would you be interested? And we were interested, but we thought this very likely was some type of setup.
The anonymous whistleblower wanted to meet Browder and his people at the bar of the Westbury Hotel in London.
This is the bar I was sitting with him, and I was sitting at that corner table right by the white lampshade. It's a little kind of scary thing to do.
And what was so scary about it?
Well, I mean, they had, not these particular people, but Litvinenko had been poisoned in a hotel bar very much like this one. So the idea that somebody is calling me in when I'm causing all this problems in Russia and wants to, do they want to give me information or do they want to poison you? You don't really know, right?
Could be a kind of trap.
Absolutely.
A few years earlier, in that same neighborhood, the Russian spy Litvinenko was poisoned with radioactive polonium. So, Browder sent a team of security people ahead.
They went with a Geiger counter to make sure there wasn't any radiation. They strategically positioned themselves around the bar, and then Jameson and my colleague then sat down and asked him what he had.
The whistleblower's name was Alexander Peripolichny, and he turned out to have important information.
What did he tell you?
And said, I have some information on these tax inspectors about 2 offshore companies that they have with about $11 million in them, and also
that will be crucial information, right?
Right.
He was the money manager for the fraudsters. He was a money launderer for the fraudsters, but he had fallen out with them.
The information from the whistleblower made it clear that employees of the Russian tax authority had made millions from the Magnitsky fraud. The money was used, among other things, to buy expensive apartments in Dubai. We have an appointment with Heidi Blake, a reporter for the website BuzzFeed. Blake has investigated Peripolichny.
Peripolichny was certainly aware that he was taking a big risk, and we know that he was receiving death threats from Russia. He'd been informed that he was on a hit list, so we know that he was afraid for his life.
Peripolichny lived in an exclusive residential neighborhood near London. In November 2012, while jogging, he suddenly collapsed and died.
He dropped dead at the side of the road, and the British police arrived at the scene and immediately accepted that his death was a heart attack, caused by just natural causes. They just closed down the case, said it's non-suspicious, and moved on.
Blake demonstrates that in 14 suspicious deaths, including that of Perepelichny, there were strong suspicions against Russia. For her investigation, she receives a Pulitzer Prize nomination.
I do believe Alexander Perepelichny was murdered. We have obtained details of a classified intelligence briefing prepared by the Office for the Director of National Intelligence, the highest office in the US intelligence community, and passed to US Congress, which states with high confidence that Perepelichny was assassinated on the direct orders of Vladimir Putin.
An independent researcher found traces of a poisonous plant inside the whistleblower's stomach.
A poison called Gelsemium. It's a rare plant found on the Himalayas which triggers heart attack and is therefore called heartbreak grass.
It's only used by apparently FSB, KGB spies and the Chinese intelligence service to murder people.
It's difficult to be 100% sure because the police had thrown away most of Alexander Perepelichny's stomach contents.
The British government seemed to be doing everything they could to cover up the matter.
Theresa May was the Home Secretary at the time that Alexander Perepelichny died, and therefore was responsible for overseeing the police, who said that his death was non-suspicious and shut down any investigation. And it was her Home Office who went to court to obtain a secrecy order banning the disclosure of 34 documents about Perepelichny on national security grounds.
Basically, what's happening in London is that the Russians have come to a very clear realization that they can kill here and there'll be no consequence.
What we understand from our sources is that the British government has been unwilling to pick a fight with Russia, doesn't want to anger the Kremlin or Vladimir Putin, partly because there's a huge amount of Russian money which is invested in British banks and properties every year, partly because Britain has very important strategic energy investments in Russia and with Russian companies, and partly because there's a genuine fear of what Russia is capable of doing.
Meanwhile, in late 2012, a new Dutch cabinet was appointed.
Zo waarlijk helpe mij, God almachtig.
I thought, this is great. Frans Timmermans is the foreign minister. This should be a no-brainer now.
Timmermans used to live in Moscow and speaks Russian. That will come in handy in the Dutch Russia Year, to be celebrated in 2013.
Если Бог продлит жизнь и здравие, Петербург будет другой Амстердам.
I called up his office to try to schedule a meeting, and they refused to schedule a meeting. And from that moment on, I was not able to have any contact with Frans Timmermans, and there was no support from his office for a Magnitsky Act.
2 years later, Frans Timmermans was appointed to the European Commission. Browder continued to attempt contact.
On a number of occasions, he would be at the World Economic Forum in Davos when I was there. And every time he was there, I requested a meeting, and every time he refused.
We've sent Timmermans several requests for an interview, but we received no response.
And believe me, if we do this visa sanction thing, and they can't come to Europe, that really will hurt them. And it will scare the hell out of everybody else who has done similar crimes.
Back to Browder's meeting with the members of Parliament in 2011. At that point, Timmermans made the following comment.
Perhaps I could just tell you what we could potentially do, and that's try and table a motion on this issue. I'm not sure it's going to make a great impression on the Dutch government. We've had some experience with the freezing of assets in the Netherlands. It's a very difficult issue here because, as you know, they don't want to scare off potential investors and others.
It's money. It's always money. Holland is a mercantile country, and we don't want to cut off the flow of money. Everybody who is a foreign minister of the Netherlands wants to try to appease Putin. It almost doesn't matter what party they come from.
A portion of the hundreds of millions of dollars from the Magnitsky fraud is said to have been laundered through the Netherlands.
You start out here, with the Russian treasury paying out $230 million of illegal tax rebates to our stolen companies. And after that is this spider web of money laundering going down, in this particular case, to 3 recipients.
In late 2017, the Dutch public prosecutor began an investigation into a money laundering operation allegedly run through this canal house in Amsterdam. It houses Affy Europe Real Estate. The public prosecutor is investigating one of Affy's shady business partners, Previzin Holdings.
Wat is nou het witwassen? Het witwassen is het verhullen van de criminele bron. Nou, hoe doe je dat verhullen? Door die talloze transacties en rechtspersonen die ertussen zitten.
Al die verschillende bedrijven die ertussen zitten, is alleen maar bedoeld om te verhullen waar het geld vandaan komt.
Waar de oorspronkelijke bron ligt, ja.
We discussed the money laundering affair with fraud expert Kees Schaap. At our request, he's taken a look at the suspicious transactions.
Het heeft alle uiterlijke kenmerken van witwastransacties. Dus dat er sprake is van het sluizen van, crimineel geld.
The man behind Previzin is Denis Katsev, a Russian from Moscow with special connections.
Denis Katsev is the son of a high-level official in the Putin regime named Pyotr Katsev. Pyotr Katsev was at one point the vice governor of the Moscow region. He's currently the vice president of one of the largest Russian companies, Russian Railways, a Russian government-owned company. But most importantly, he's a close associate of the general prosecutor of Russia and one of Putin's main enforcers.
So, Katsev has connections in some of Moscow's highest places.
Dat betekent dus dat er al bellen moeten gaan rinkelen bij de naam Previzin.
Ja.
We attempt to contact Katsev's lawyer in Moscow, a woman by the name of Natalia Veselnitskaya, a well-known name. Last year, this lawyer suddenly made global headlines.
We now know more about the Russian lawyer, Natalia Veselnitskaya, well connected to the Kremlin and a familiar figure in Washington lobbying against Russian sanctions. She flew in specially from Moscow to meet with Trump's inner circle on the 25th floor of Trump Tower, one floor below the office of Donald Trump Sr.
During the American election campaign in 2016, the lawyer had a secret meeting with, among others, Trump's son, Donald Jr. Nothing special, says his father.
In the case of Don, he listened. I guess they talked about, as I see it, they talked about adoption and some things.
Why did Trump's campaign team talk to a Russian lawyer about adoption? The real topic of conversation at Trump Tower was the Russian act prohibiting adoptions by Americans. The act that Putin intended as revenge for the American Magnitsky sanctions.
The purpose of the meeting was one thing and one thing only, which was to withdraw the Magnitsky Act, get the Magnitsky Act repealed. She asked Donald Trump Jr. very explicitly if when his father becomes president, whether he could orchestrate the repeal of the Magnitsky Act.
Emails from Donald Trump Jr. about this meeting reveal that he assumed that the lawyer was coming on behalf of the Russian government, and also that she would provide adverse information about Hillary Clinton, the Democratic candidate. An explosive issue, because this could prove a conspiracy with the Kremlin.
Whether she provided it or not, or whether she offered it properly or not, is a matter for the special prosecutor Mueller to figure out.
At first, the lawyer responds with great mistrust to our request for an interview. She wants to know if we are being paid by Bill Browder, because, according to her, he would only tell us lies about the Kremlin and about her client, Denis Katsev. A few weeks later, we are told that we can come to Berlin for an interview. Veselnitskaya insists on bringing her own interpreter. The lawyer makes it clear to us that she wants nothing to do with Browder.
А я уставшая от этого человека, от этого подонка, от всей его команды.
with that villain, with that person and his entire team.
Потому что слишком много жизней эта команда унесла уже. И еще, скорее всего, унесет.
Apparently you are involved in the campaign against the Magnitsky Act in the United States.
Нет, я всего лишь делаю то, что я считаю делать правильным для защиты интересов своего клиента.
And that person was Denis Katsev.
И этим лицом оказался.
Совершенно верно.
She says she had not been sent to New York by the Kremlin to talk to the Trump campaign.
Я никогда не выступала от имени правительства Российской Федерации.
I never acted on behalf of the Russian government.
Но сочту за честь.
Why?
Почему?
Потому что это моя страна. И потому что такие подонки, как Browder, ее пытаются демонизировать.
Do the Russian authorities or the prosecutor's office in any way help you in defending your client?
Нет, защиту моего клиента российские власти и Генеральная прокуратура, даже если бы очень хотела, не смогла помочь. Безусловно, мы находимся на одной стороне с российской властью. И в этом смысле, как и в других обстоятельствах, я делюсь своей информацией и максимально готова помочь нашему следствию выяснять эти факты.
So, Veselnitskaya is an informant for the Russian government. Coming back to the Dutch money laundering investigation into Prevezin and Denis Katsev, the lawyer makes herself very clear.
Я уверена, что рано или поздно это дело будет прекращено.
But her optimism seems rather premature, because the Dutch public prosecutor has frozen 3 million euros of assets belonging to Katsev.
Er is sprake van ernstige aanwijzingen, ja. Ernstige bezwaren heet dat dan zo mooi in de wet. Maar dat is meer dan een simpele verdenking.
Dan liggen er wel bewijzen aan ten grondslag.
Dan ligt daar bewijzen aan ten grondslag, ja.
The money laundering through Amsterdam is all the more reason for Bill Browder to advocate a Dutch Magnitsky Act.
It's very important for us to take all civilized countries and get them to pass a Magnitsky Act so you don't have Holland becoming a magnet for dirty Russian money, for blood money coming from Russia because there is no Magnitsky Act.
The poisoning of the Russian double agent Skripal in Great Britain has turned the European mood. Various EU countries have expelled Russian diplomats. All the more reason to talk to European Commissioner Frans Timmermans. He has not responded to our requests in weeks.
Dat verbaast ons nogal, eerlijk gezegd. Want...
Ja, nee, klopt. Dat had ook eerder moeten gebeuren.
Bill Browder zegt, ik heb verschillende malen geprobeerd nadat Timmermans zo positief was over die sancties, om hem weer te spreken te krijgen en toen ontliep hij mij. En wij zouden heel graag van Timmermans weten, klopt dat en waarom was dat?
But we have not heard from the European Commissioner since. Coincidence or not, since the assault on Skripal, the Magnitsky Act has reappeared on the parliamentary agenda. The Dutch coalition parties, CDA, D66, and Christian Union, have submitted a motion demanding sanctions.
Wij vinden dat het tijd is voor een nieuwe poging om dit samen met de EU-landen te doen. En anders dient Nederland het alleen te doen.
De gewijzigde motie Omtzigt over de Magnitsky-wet. Partij van de Arbeid, GroenLinks. Partij voor de Dieren, Denk, 50PLUS, D66, SGP, CDA, ChristenUnie. Aangenomen.
Deze motie heeft de naam van Magnitsky. Het is ook bedoeld voor de mensen die Magnitsky vermoord hebben. Maar is zeker niet enkel en alleen voor Rusland bedoeld.
Foreign Affairs Minister Blok of the pro-free market VVD party had expressed earlier opposition to Dutch sanctions. His party has voted against the motion, just as the Socialist Party and two right-wing populist parties have.
Nee, ik vind de feiten niet hard. Helemaal niet. Het is zoals steeds, het zijn allerlei beschuldigingen, terwijl heel onduidelijk is wat er gaande is. Ik denk dat we er veel meer aan hebben om op een normale, goede manier met onze oostelijke buurman om te gaan. Ik ga niet mee in dit koude oorlogsspel dat gespeeld wordt.
Bent u niet bang voor een reactie uit Rusland?
Ze zullen ongetwijfeld reageren. Maar als je in je buitenlands beleid nooit iets doet omdat je bang bent voor een reactie, ja, dan zul je nooit kunnen optreden tegen wat voor vorm van mensenrechten schendingen dan ook.
Britain packs a lot heavier punch than you guys do. And they're willing to kill people here. All right, if you don't think that Russian corruption is in Holland now, and if you don't think it's going to get worse, the message that needs to be sent to Russia now is, we see you doing it, and now we're going to start imposing real costs.
To find out more about Russian influence in the Netherlands, visit our website at zembla.tv.